Research Institute to talk about these angry little birds.
Right, like Philip said, I work with Rob, Raptor View Research Institute. The American kestrel is one of my favorite birds we work with. They're really abundant, they're pretty tolerant of human activity, they're aggressive feeders, makes them kind of easy to catch. I think all this stuff, and they're charismatic in hand, like Philip says, they take divots out of you, and they're real spirited. You can kind of see up on its beak. That point's called the tomial tooth, and it's a characteristic of falcons that causes pain. Anyway, as Philip showed in his slides, I think that these guys, because of the reasons I named, make really cool subjects for educational opportunities for kids and stuff. We trap them right by the road. Very abundant, like I said. And basically, I want to give you guys a little bit of the natural history on these guys and then what we're doing. They're about the size of a mourning dove, bigger heads. Females tend to be 10% larger than males, roughly. Lifespan's kind of difficult to identify due to the, it's hard to separate mortality from dispersion. They're our smallest, most widespread and common falcon in North America. Like I said, it's difficulty to identify survivorship estimates, but most of the studies I've read say, 2/3 of them die the hatch year of life, and if they survive their first winter, probably 2 to 4 years. The longest known individual in the wild was 11 years old, based on banding data. In captivity, 14 years, and an average life expectancy in captivity of just over 5. They're sexually dimorphic in plumage, male on the left, blue-gray wings, rufous tail with one big subterminal black band. The female, on the other hand, is a lot more uniform, black barring over the wings, back, and tail. Like I said, it's the most widely distributed falcon in North America. It uses most of North America in one way or another. In the Bitterroot Valley, it's kind of hard to see, but we are in the breeding and wintering ground. In reality, we have birds that breed here, head south in winter, birds that spend year-round here, and probably some birds that come down from up north to winter here. Past 200 years, their range significantly increased as forested lands were cleared for farming and agriculture. This trend's continuing today south of the map, or Central America, and mainly Central America, some of the Amazonian forests that are being wiped out. As far as in its range, it's kind of fragmented based on where habitat's good. It likes short ground vegetation with suitable woody structure for nests and perches. It's difficult to determine exact territorial size. It's likely highly varied nesting density as well, dependent on food and potential nesting sites. Probably safe to say that most territories, I added a bit on each end from what they actually said in the paper, but about 1/2 kilometer to 2 3/4 kilometer in diameter. This data is from our spring and fall counts conducted on the MPG ranch. They correlate pretty well with our 2011. And basically the takeaway, just to give you a sense of when they're moving in and out, we expect the bulk of them to come in mid-April to late April this season, and they'll be around, some will continue north, and then they take off after breeding and head south in early to mid-September. They primarily hunt from a perch, although it's pretty visible when they're hovering. I like this photo a lot. It's taken by a guy named Rob Palmer. I think it exemplifies how steady they keep their head when they're searching for prey hovering. As conspicuous as it is, one study in California of over 1,300 dives on prey, 97% of those originated from a perch, not a hover. So what do they eat? I got this from Birds of North America species account. They just kind of synthesized a few different studies, and basically the takeaway here is it's variable depending where they are and what's around, but mostly, they're eating a lot of insects, mammals and birds to a lesser extent in different proportions based on where you are. They're secondary cavity nesters. They rely on, they don't build their own nests basically, so they rely on cavities in trees, stones, abandoned woodpecker holes, or nest boxes. They readily use nest boxes, which have become a really, really neat management tool for these guys. There's a number of studies that have documented the increase in nesting density, and they've documented kestrels at habitat that have never been used before based on just putting nest boxes up. So they are able to breed their first year in life. It's estimated about 80% do. They have monogamous relationships, but that being said, if one mate disappears, they readily pick up another one. The female generally lays eggs on on consecutive days. The day of the second to last egg, she will begin incubation. She's responsible for the majority of incubation, with estimates at around 85%. They put out 1 brood per season typically, although 2 aren't extremely uncommon. And the incubation period is about 30 days. So this is kind of a busy slide, and it's another one I took from the species account, Birds of North America. Another synthesis, and the takeaway here is that the mean clutch size is really consistent there. It's 4 to 5, pretty solid, an average of 4.6. Next to it, we got hatching success, ranges from 62 to 89, pretty variable. We'll skip the next column and then go to fledgling success, which is really high. I mean, it's normally pretty high. There's that one study with a 72, but that's not the norm. So basically, clutch is typically 4 to 5 eggs. Hatching success is variable. Fledgling success is typically very high. After hatching, the female will brood the young for 7 to 10 days. The male's fully responsible for all foraging efforts during that time. The young will stay in the box, developing for about 30 days and fledge right around then. 27 to 31 days is the estimate. After fledging, even though they're really quite capable hunters, they've been shown to track prey even before they really can fly. They know what they're doing. Very instinctive driven, but they're relying on feeding from parents for 10 to 14 days, and after that they kind of disperse away from the nesting site. So why do we care? I mean, they are abundant, but it's not just that they're abundant. I imagine the passenger pigeon, there were a bunch of them around a couple of years before they went extinct. It's really about their abundance over time. We have data on long-term declines from the USGS breeding bird surveys, the Audubon Society's Christmas bird counts, a number of nest box monitoring programs across the country, really, and then migration data, typically from the eastern count sites, have been showing a lot of declines. So I got this from American Kestrel Partnership. I'll talk about them in a moment. This was based on breeding bird survey from the USGS, which basically there's predetermined, randomly determined routes that they drive. They've done it for a lot of years now, and they just count what they see. And you can see it's not looking all that great. There's a lot of unknown, but there's a lot of decline and very little growth. You can see we're region 10 there, which is the Northern Rockies, and we got a nice data set from 66 to 2008 here. And it's shown that in that time period, our population has declined by roughly 55%. This is, I got this from the same guys, same type of thing, just showing different regions. We have 88% decline in the New England Mid-Atlantic coast region. That's huge. 60% declines in the Southern Rockies and Lower Great Lakes region. And nationwide, or excuse me, North America-wide, we're at an estimate of 47% decline since the mid-60s. So recently, the Peregrine Fund formed the American Kestrel Partnership, which is a kind of a group of interested biologists trying to answer some of these questions. We don't know why they're declining. We don't know what the causes are. And they're trying to identify some specific research goals for the near future. And they're also, what I think is really cool, is coordinating a network of people monitoring nest boxes all across the country. And they have right now over 1,000 nest boxes being monitored in 150 locations. And what I think is cool about it is, say, Bo was talking about kestrels nesting at MPG North. You could gather data on those birds, but you got one nest box. I mean, it's not, what good is it, But when you put all these pieces together nationwide and you take some data on the nest boxes, what's occupied, what's not occupied, and what's going on, I think we're going to get some really cool stuff out of it. So what can we do to help? In 2011, we started a pilot color marking effort. We wanted to evaluate whether this would be worthwhile to follow up. We were going to try and individually mark birds, hope they showed up next year, and be able to start collecting data on them. So in the bottom left-hand corner, we have a male kestrel that was captured on what's called a BC trap. It's kind of like a shark cage for mice covered in nooses. We'll put that out on the ground, and it's amazing how quickly the kestrel can pick it up. And like I said, they're aggressive foragers, and they're relatively easy to catch compared to other raptors. And they come right in. We caught 34 in 2011, 22 adults, 12 nestlings. And in 2012, we saw 5 of those adults and 0 young. It's kind of a difficult statistic to, either way, I think 5 out of 22 is pretty good, and it's better than I was really expecting. There's color mark processes or projects across the country that have varied results. But part of the thing is we did 22 adults and we started banding relatively early while migration was going on still. So it's really difficult to separate out how many adults actually used the ranch for breeding and then headed south. Either way, 5 adults I was pretty happy about it. Unfortunately, 2 of them were found as mortalities, one in a stock tank and one near the orchard house. Not quite sure why the one near the orchard house died, but on kind of a cool note, they were raising young, and then that bird's partner, the female, was able to by herself successfully fledge 4 young. So that was pretty cool. In 2012, we went at it again. We banded another 23 adults and 24 nestlings. This little guy in the lower right-hand corner, I bet Kate's hoping he comes back so they can talk about the Steelers. 2012, we had 17 territories known, 6 natural cavities, 8 nest boxes, and 3 unknown territories, which we define them as the presence of 2 adults seen regularly or the presence of fledged young. We weren't able to find them though. We also documented productivity for 14 territories and got a total of 56 young, an average of 4.0 young per nest, which is relatively pretty good compared to the Kestrel partnership. I wasn't able to get that data specifically, but I talked to Matt Giovanni, who we've been coordinating with. He actually came to the ranch a couple months ago, and he's the head of the Kestrel partnership, and he said offhand that's looking pretty good. So 2013, what are we going to do? Nest box monitoring, more color marking, rigorous resighting efforts, and Nick kind of brushed on the RFID technology. Nest box monitoring, first off, we need to know how many boxes there are on the ranch and where. We don't know. They've been kind of put up sporadically by different people, so we're going to have to quickly kind of map them out, get GPS location, take some basic data on them, including how high off the ground they are, how they're oriented, what direction they're facing, just some baseline data on them, which we can use to try and determine what's more likely to be an occupied nest box. Plan to regularly visit them throughout the season to document the clutch size, hatching success, and fledge success rates. We can do a lot of this with the peeper cam, which Kate experimented with a lot last year. And depending on what all we want to do, we might want to be accessing the nest by ladder as well if we want to get some sort of measurement of how the young are growing, mass, or that kind of thing. I want to point out that we're not just looking at nest boxes. We'll monitor the natural cavities to the best of our abilities, but they're not as easily accessed. Sometimes they're too tall for the peeper camera and you can't safely climb to them, so we're a bit more limited based on the actual individual nest site there. This is just kind of a series of progression taken by the peeper cam. Here's 5 little guys taken early on in development. And this photo is a little bit tougher to tell what's going on, but they've lost some down, got some more feathers, and then here they are a little bit later getting ready to take off, and you can actually see the accumulation of fecal matter on the sides of the walls here. And that actually has a strong ammonia smell that can be noticed when you open it up, and it keeps down bacteria and stuff. It's actually sanitary in a weird way. So color marking, we use the BC traps. This year we're going to go after it really hard, try and get all the breeding adults and all the nestlings. Again, the natural cavities are going to be more tricky. It'll be more touch and go there. We're going to combine this effort with our resighting efforts. We're going to try and link every individual that's breeding to its specific territory and mate. While we have them in hand, it's a good opportunity to collect morphological measurements and feather and blood samples. Feather and blood, well, I want to talk talk to the Kestrel partnership, see how we can be available. One of the things they really have identified as a research need is toxicology on these birds. At the MPG ranch, we're not, it seems like our birds would be relatively clean, and maybe it's like kind of a negative data as data thing, like maybe we'll do better. So I want to talk to them and see how useful that could be. And also I'd like to investigate relatedness amongst these individuals, especially if we're going to be able to individually mark a large amount of them and see where they are. I think that would be neat to do. The RFID technology, which Nick talked about, radio frequency identification, you guys might be familiar with pit tags. It's the same type of technology. You can see very, very small, and ideally, this is kind of a new thing. We're still trying to figure out how to approach it and where to go with it, but it's got a lot of potential. We could put one of these bands on the bird. They're relatively low cost. It would be under $5 per marker. And then position a reader at the nest box entrance. And if we were able to do that with all the adults and all the young, we would be able to start looking at stuff like parental investment, who's incubating, for how long, how often they're switching. We're able to see feeding behavior, how often they're feeding, by who. The young, when they're fledging, exactly how, and then post-fledging, their reliance on the nest box. And this is all stuff that would be very time-consuming, expensive to gather out in the field by observation. And here we have the opportunity to just, if we get them in hand, throw these on there and then collect it passively. So in conclusion, it seems like with Kestrels, we're able to get a lot of data for a reasonable amount of effort. We can get insight on nest site fidelity. Survivorship, kind of, in that by color marking birds, we could tell this individual has been here 3 years or 2 years. But, you know, like I said, it's difficult to estimate mortality rates and survivorship rates. Nest selection, you know, them not using a nest box is data too. Why aren't they using a nest box? You know, there's been this talk of using birds as kind of a response variable to certain treatments. I think we have potential with that too. One limiting factor on the MPG ranch I see is that there's not a lot of woody structure in most of it. So we can put nest boxes up on power lines and trees where they are, but where there's not, we're kind of limited. It would be, I mean, that's good foraging habitat, and I'm sure we could have a lot higher nesting density, but there's just not the structure. Mate fidelity, obviously with the color marking, see who's with who. Productivity, went over that, nest box monitoring, and then the PFID technology to do parental roles, investment, development of young. And then I just kind of touched on relatedness and toxicology. We're going to have to talk more about that, what we want to do, but it is an option. Before I stop talking, I want to acknowledge Kate, Kerr, and Debbie. Their help was really crucial to finding these birds and stuff. I'd also want to thank Kate Davis and Rob Palmer for the photos, and Matt Giovanni with the Kestrel partnership, who's given a lot of great info. So, yeah. Yeah.
Have you come across any evidence, or what do you suspect about the monogamous behavior